When is it again? It keeps happening.
Yeah, last time they drilled a hole in the. This time they.
Well, there he is. Open your eyes.
A little more less.
We have that ongoing issue.
Or maybe once upon a time somebody did a report.
That's what we're.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Day to day.
Yeah.
So now we can find it out.
Yeah.
If you can't keep your cars there.
Or we're in operations.
Yeah, but
Are you having it any
Really much.
no, just the creek.
So I got there when I was
darn creekers?
Yeah.
I guess as soon as the mayor shares the agenda and then moves on.
But asking Kelly to do something is just you can run around and talk to people.
Adventure series. So he's always
Yeah.
I see that it's 3:31. So I'm calling the meeting to order. Committee of the Whole for the Town of Gibsons at 3:31, May 20th, 2025. And we're honored to be gathered here on the traditional territories of the Skokomish Nation. First, we need to approve the agenda. Moved by Councillor Kroll, seconded by Councillor DeAndrade. All those in favor? The motion carries. And we have a number of reports today, really important reports having to do with our strategic plan and a lot of our strategic priorities for this term. It's kind of a critical juncture of looking at some of them and moving forward on them in terms of our water, our work on water and our official community plan. So the first one we're looking at is the Complete Communities Assessment, and our Director of Planning is here to present that with Urban Systems. I can't hear you. We've never done that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. We've got Sam Leahy and Ken Carnes here from Urban Systems, and they're going to be presenting the Complete Communities project.
Hello. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Just share my screen 1 second. We have a short presentation. Can everybody see that? Excellent. Great. Good afternoon. My name's Samantha Lahi. I'm a community planner with Urban Systems, and I'm joined by my colleague Kendrick Carnes, a civil engineer also with Urban Systems. And we are here today to present the Complete Communities Assessment. A quick agenda for our presentation. We will provide an overview of the project. We will describe the key activities undertaken. We will outline our key findings, and we will discuss next steps. And we're happy to answer any questions at the end of this short presentation. An overview of the Complete Communities Assessment. The Complete Communities Assessment is a program funded through UBCM. The purpose is to provide evidence-based analysis that can be used to inform decision-making in communities. The town's assessment focused on redevelopment potential to assess infrastructure deficiencies and upgrades to support future growth. The intent of this report is to inform the ongoing OCP update. Complete Communities assessments are required to follow 3 distinct phases, which this project did. Phase 1 is prepare, which involves extensive data collection and framing the questions that the assessment would like to answer. Phase 2 is assess, which included detailed mapping of the 4 lenses identified through the program: housing, transportation, daily needs, and infrastructure, and assessing these lenses against the framing questions. And phase 3 is act, which is the recommended outcomes, actions, and implementation plan. We'll provide a quick overview of the key activities included in Phase 2, Assess. We mapped 5 daily needs indicators across the town, including healthcare, education, childcare, groceries, and parks. Each parcel in the town was then assessed to determine walkability to each of these daily needs. Parcels that have all 5 daily needs located within 200 meters or approximately a 5-minute walk received a score of 50 points, and parcels that have all 5 daily needs located within 400 meters or approximately a 10-minute walk received a score of 25 points, and parcels with no access to daily needs received a score of 0 points. Parcels scored with high scores are represented in green, and parcels with low scores are represented in red. As you can see from the map, parcels along Gibsons Way and within the residential areas of Lower Gibsons had the highest daily needs scores. For transportation, access to transportation was scored on a similar manner to daily needs based on proximity to either a bus stop or to a bike or pedestrian facility. Parcels that had access to all types of transportation facilities scored 20 points. If they had access to one, they scored 10, and access to none scored 0. Parcels with high scores are represented in green, and low scores are represented in red. And similar to the daily needs, areas along Gibsons Way and the residential area of Lower Gibsons had the highest transportation scores. For housing, we looked at redevelopment potential. We identified a series of characteristics that tend to indicate a parcel's readiness for redevelopment. This includes the improvement ratio, so the value of the land relative to the value of the building, the parcel's slope, how vacant the parcel was, the average age of population in the neighborhood, the lot size, and the potential for lot assembly. Parcels were given scores for each of these indicators and can receive up to 100 points in total. We then ran the model twice, once to assess a parcel's likelihood to redevelop in a missing middle or small-scale multi-unit housing building typology, and once to assess the parcel's likelihood to redevelop as an apartment typology. Lot size was the key differentiator between these two assessments. The likelihood of redevelopment results are shown in the 2 maps, both the small-scale multi-unit housing and the apartment. Red parcels indicate higher scores, so those more likely to redevelop, scaling down to yellow, which is less likely to redevelop. It is important to note that there is no perfect way to predict redevelopment. This assessment gives us some good intel where parcels appear to have higher development appeal. We then used the likelihood of redevelopment model to create 2 growth scenarios for the town. A conservative growth scenario assumes that 5% of all residential parcels in the municipality would redevelop, which totals 80 parcels. And an aggressive growth scenario assumes that 10% of all residential parcels would redevelop, which totals 159 parcels. For both of these scenarios, it was assumed that of the parcels that would redevelop, 70% would redevelop as a small-scale multi-unit housing development, and 30% would redevelop as apartment-type buildings. So for the conservative scenario, this takes the 80 parcels and splits it into 56 small-scale multi-unit housing developments and 24 apartment developments. For the aggressive scenario, this splits the 159 parcels into 111 small-scale multi-unit housing developments and 48 apartment developments. The parcels that were assumed to redevelop were based on their ranking within the likelihood of redevelopment modeling. So the higher the parcel scored, it was more likely to be included in the growth scenarios. And note that neither of these scenarios account for development applications that are currently in stream, but as you'll soon see in a couple slides, we do account for those in a different manner. So our key findings, we use these two growth scenarios to draw some observations and recommendations about how the town could accommodate these two growth scenarios. First, we wanted to assess how this growth compares to the town's housing need. So based on the housing needs report, we know that Gibsons needs 331 new housing units by 2026 and 1,057 new housing units by 2041. There are currently 1,211 units subject to in-stream development applications, the locations of which are illustrated in blue on this map. Should all of these units be realized, the town's 20-year housing need would actually be exceeded without even considering the two growth scenarios. So in terms of achieving housing needs, we feel that the town is in good position to meet those as outlined in the housing needs report. We also looked at forecasting future growth. So we projected the number of units associated with the two growth scenarios, what the increase in population would be, and what did build out, so a time horizon. So for the conservative scenario, this equated to an increase of approximately 2,600 units, which equates to approximately an increase of 4,700 residents. And based on a 0.5 annual growth rate, this would take approximately 139 years to achieve the build-out. Looking at the aggressive scenario, this is an increase of approximately 4,100 units, an increase of approximately 6,800 residents. And based on the same 0.5 annual growth rate, this would take approximately 179 years to achieve. We did want to note that the 0.5% growth rate reflects the status quo population growth from the last two census periods, so about 3% over 5 years. And just to note that, we can't always align redevelopment growth with population growth, but it's a good proxy to understand how the town could develop over time. And of course, there are many external factors such as market conditions, labor force, all those things outside of municipal control that impact development trends. I'm going to pass it over to Ken now, who will walk through the infrastructure assessments.
Great, thanks, Sam. Can everyone hear me okay?
Could I just ask, I just have a quick question because there was a confusing part of that last slide.
Sure.
Yeah, just on that. The aggressive scenario is for would be potentially faster growth, right?
The aggressive scenario sees more parcels redeveloping. So that's based on 10% of all residential land in the town redeveloping, where the conservative was the 5% of all residential land redeveloping.
Okay. And that would take longer for aggressive. That's just kind of counterintuitive, but it's just my brain. We'll move on.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great, thanks, Sam. So what we did with the growth scenarios, we took the population increase, the increased demands for each parcel for the small scale multi-unit housing, as well as the apartments, and plugged that data into the town's water and sanitary models and reviewed the increases in the model. And so what this figure here is showing is the town's water system and the available fire flow available at each hydrant. And so we overlaid that with the new developments. You can see in yellow the small scale multi-unit housing, where those are most likely to appear, as well as the planned development and then the apartments. So what this figure is showing is that in Upper Gibsons, there's lots of fire flow available, but as you get towards the water up on the bluff, the fire flow is less. And so we looked at what the water main upgrades would be to provide at least 90 liters per second for the small scale multi-unit housing, as well as what the max day demands would be for the future aggressive and conservative scenarios. And what we found was that 2 new water supply wells would have to be developed in order to meet the future populations associated with those 2 growths. The previous water supply strategy report was based on the old OCP, but with these new growth scenarios, that is pushing the town's population above what was originally planned for the OCP build out. And we'll see that in the sanitary side as well. So generally the water supply can be met with some additional upgrades as the population increases past the current forecast. Next slide there, Sam. The collection system is adequately sized for future growth. However, the downstream side is at capacity, so the sanitary outfall leaving the wastewater treatment plant is currently at capacity, and that was identified in the strategic plan for the sewer, as well as the improved assessment here. There's just 2 sanitary pipes in the collection system that require upsizing for the conservative and aggressive growth scenarios. And as the population increases, there's significant upgrades required at the wastewater treatment plant. So the town staff is aware that those upgrades are required, and they'll be watching when those plant upgrades would be required. Yeah, anything else? I think that's it for this assessment. Sam, back to you.
Great. We just have 2 slides left, or 1 slide left actually, about the implementation and next steps. So the Complete Communities Assessment culminates in a series of 38 individual recommendations. All recommendations are categorized under the 4 lenses of daily needs, transportation, infrastructure, and housing. And we have assigned timelines for each of those recommendations along a spectrum from quick wins, so 1 to 2 years, to long-term improvements, 10 plus years. We've also assigned a lead for implementation, whether it's a policy and programming initiative or a capital project. All the recommendations reflect complete community principles, so ensuring housing is developed in proximity to daily needs and transportation systems, and that housing development does not get ahead of the town's infrastructure needs. So that's all we have for our presentation today. There's a very fulsome report with lots of information. So we're happy to take any questions either today or in the future as well. Thank you.
I think we've probably got some questions from councillors. I want to first ask the obvious one to our staff, which is how does this link into some of the other work we're doing and some of the other work we've already done? I assume we're not going to have to redo our DCC's bylaw that we just passed, and our OCP that's already been drafted and we're going to have a look at very soon with the community. I think I gather a lot of this data was shared simultaneously as these things were being developed. Yeah, I'll go to Director of Infrastructure.
Thank you. So yeah, the infrastructure upgrades that were identified just in this presentation were prepared or presented after the DCC bylaw had been submitted to committee and council. I don't think that there's a lot in there that wasn't identified in the strategic plan, certainly for the sanitary system. I don't believe there'd be any upgrades required. For water, there may be a couple sections of water main that were not included in the DCC bylaws, so that could be reviewed as part of the upgrades that were proposed to do on an annual basis. There's also, I think, could be noted that, and certainly not to take away from the effort that has gone into this, but some of it is somewhat, there's a bit of speculation that goes into it as well, in terms of we've looked at the most likely to redevelop, but there are sections that properties may redevelop that didn't score as high as the analysis evaluated them too. So we're not saying that these are the only parcels that are able to redevelop or that will to redevelop. It's just the most likely ones. And so we looked at the servicing capacity through that lens. And we think that we've identified areas that we could facilitate growth by increasing capacity, but it's not to say that that's the only properties that would be redeveloping. So we'd have to just put some thought into how best to integrate the results of this analysis into our future planning DCC bylaw as well, whether it would make sense to include it in the DCC bylaw or just have them noted that if properties were to redevelop in that way, there would need to be a capacity increase. So that we haven't had the time to digest the results of this and think about how to best integrate it into our infrastructure planning and particularly the DCC bylaw.
Okay, thanks. And Director of Planning?
Thank you, Mayor. So this is perfect timing to get a report like this because we haven't released the draft of the OCP yet. And there's so much in here that will go into the OCP in terms of how we look at density, where we're going to put housing, how it's connected to daily needs and transportation. So we have shared the draft with the consultant, but we can workshop this as well because there could be some pretty big changes in the land use decisions coming up.
Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White. And through you, Mayor White, one of the questions I had in the presentation that was just given to us online, there was talk of foreshore upgrade. Now, is this a foreshore upgrade or potential moving of the foreshore, what is currently the foreshore sewage collector?
Director of Infrastructure.
Thank you. Through the mayor, that those two collection, or I think one collection main that's on the foreshore, that was identified in the strategic plan for the sanitary collection system. So it's currently was identified there that it's close to capacity, and so it's just been that analysis has come through that it is still it would need to be expanded to be able to facilitate more significant flow. And just, if I may, the scope of this project was not looking at the future climate resiliency of our collection system. It was really just focused on growth-related capacity.
Go ahead.
Thank you for that clarification. Something that sort of becomes sort of blatantly apparent in this report, when you look at the criteria for livability in a community, the Lower Village has gone from a situation where we had 2 grocery stores, we had a bank, we had a pharmacy, and those are all gone, which are sort of highlighted as criteria to make the Upper Village more livable. So it would certainly occur to me that something we should be looking at is restoring or encouraging the reintroduction of some of those elements into the Lower Village, particularly with an aging population and what we're trying to do to lower vehicle demand in the community. So I think that's something that we should have a serious look at when we're delving into the draft of the OCP.
It's funny, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. It's to think of that in those days. And I mean, I just ran into a business owner who's having trouble and was complaining about how the choices of consumers these days are more to order things, which is throws a whole different spin on this idea of being able to walk to, which is what I prefer doing. It's why I like and I do use the grocery store at the public market. In Lower Gibsons, but yeah, that's something to consider too. It's just with the way consumer choices are changing too to order things online, unfortunately, including even food. I've got Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, this pertains to the living near daily needs. 2 of the 5 criteria referenced in living near daily needs assessment were proximity to health and childcare services. And these two needs were ranked and received up to 25 points, which, as the Director of Planning noticed, this is going to have a bearing on our OCP. So I understand this approach, but I'm wondering if the scoring considered that those services were actually available or not, because when you're looking at childcare and healthcare, our doctors are not accepting new patients, and there's little to no childcare spaces available. So even if those services are nearby, they're not actually accessible. So did that point get taken into consideration?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have a doctor, but I have to drive to Sechelt to go see my doctor, so it's kind of irrelevant if one's close to me in Gibsons. I'll go to the consultants to.
No, we
Oh,
didn't
okay,
get into
sorry.
that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
We've got hands up at the staff table. I just thought that would be the authors of the report who would answer. Director of Planning.
Thank you. This was very much location-based, so it was a lot of GIS modeling and like access to daily needs in terms of how far it is from your home, but the doctor shortage or daycare shortage was not a component of this, so that's definitely something that's missing. And yeah, I don't know if the consultants want to add to that, but.
Yeah, Councillor D'Andrade.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the report, and I think was one thing I find interesting because they talk about local plans and policies, and they talk about the OCP, the Housing Needs Assessment, the Urban Forest Plan, but there's no mention on the Aquifer 22 report, which to me is one of the most important reports that the town has. They acknowledge the aquifer presence as a constraint regarding landscape, but in any moment it mentions what the report, the 22 report, clearly on page 19 of the report, not this one, but the waterline, they say in order to the modeling consider climate change impacts that could impact the aquifer recharge and salt intrusion. And
We're
limit.
jumping to a different report now.
No, but that.
We will have that discussion later.
No, Mayor, I'm just making a point that the waterline report talks about that in order to be low risk, our population, as the information we know, should not exceed 10,000 people. And I know this has been some discussion back and forth here, but the report talks about that. And this scenario, the aggressive scenario, including all the building permits that we have right now, it will go close to 15,000 people. So even though it may take 179 years, I get nervous to have a report that say, well, the only thing we have to address is constraint with infrastructure, but we can grow up to, we can build another 4,196 units, and no mention on the limitation that is the water supply. And
Okay, so I'm going to have to go to staff just because I want to make sure we can verify some of these things that you're saying. So one is that apparently, I mean, that I didn't see that in the other report, so that we can't go over 10,000, it's unsustainable. So I'd like that. So that was just a statement that was made.
it's not unsustainable, it's low risk.
low
Above
risk.
10,000, we are getting to a moderate risk or even more. And this is based on the current water consumption. So if we have, and the water line report talks about if we increase to 500 liters, 0.5 cubic meters per capita per person, we already moderate risk. So this is according to our current use, which is 50%.
I just really I want staff to be our authority on this, so I'm asking staff to elaborate on this.
So thank you. Through the mayor, with the current well infrastructure and monitoring infrastructure that we have and that we've been able to complete drawdown testing on of the aquifer, Waterline was able to confirm that it's low risk for the town to supply a population of 10,000 with the current understanding and infrastructure that's in place. Now, there's limitations on what you can test as far as the long-term sustainable yield out of groundwater based on the physical infrastructure that's in place. If we were to drill a larger diameter well and install a larger pump and run a new drawdown test and update the province with the information that we've gathered in the report that's presented later on the agenda, we have confidence that the results of that would yield a supportable population that's significantly more than the 10,000 that was reported out in 2021. Now, we can't say that definitively because we haven't been able to complete the testing for that, but the results and the population that was included in that report were based on the data available at the time, which are limited in some effect by some physical constraints, which larger future pump testing would provide potential more data that could support that. There's nothing in here that's committing the town to growing this way. There's nothing here that's saying that there's a guarantee that we can support that. But with all of the data that we have gathered since that 2021 aquifer report, there's a high level of confidence that the aquifer is able to sustain a larger population. And the best thing that we can do is to continue the monitoring and as we approach the limit of our current water license, explore the options for expanding the capacity.
Let me ask.
Okay, I want to make sure other councillors have a chance to, but.
Just follow.
Yeah.
Okay. So the report from Waterline was from 2021. So these findings from that the Director of Infrastructure reported was after 2021?
Yeah, that's what I heard. I mean, I also think, my understanding of these, the both aquifer mapping studies is what they do is the build out in the OCP was set, the former OCP was considered to be 10,000. So they would run tests to see if 10,000 would be supported. The result of the test was not necessarily that anything over 10,000 is impossible. It was more that will the aquifer be sustainable for 10,000? Yes or no? And then you got back the kind of the risk scenarios. It didn't say if you hit 10,001, all bets are off or anything like that. It didn't say. That was my reading of the aquifer mapping versus I guess what I'm hearing from you. Go ahead.
So through the mayor, that's correct as well. That's my understanding. I wasn't here in 2021 when that work was completed, but that was my interpretation of it. Didn't necessarily want to say that outright because I wasn't here to confirm that, but it very much reads as though they were looking at the 10,000 population threshold, which is understood to be the build out of the town at the time, and answered the question, will this support a population of 10,000? And the answer at the time was definitively yes. But there was no statement in there that says that the limit on the sustained population of the aquifer is 10,000. And with drawdown testing that the regional district has completed outside of the town boundary, but within the same aquifer system, and the drilling and development of well 6, there's an abundance of data out there that supports that the aquifer continues to be very productive and continues to be sustainably operated. There's no indications that the expanded use of it is in any way negatively impacting the aquifer, and that we don't have at this point a reason to believe that that 10,000 is actually a limit.
Councillor Lemley.
Yeah, I guess through the mayor, did we skip ahead to like 3.4?
I know it's confusing. Yeah, I was just going to say that. Let's get back on the complete communities assessment.
Yeah, because
conversation here. Yeah,
we can overlap this. I would assume during that report. Like, anyway, I was a little confused on where we were.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Director of Finance.
Thank you, Mayor White. I just wanted to add to an answer that staff gave earlier about the nature of this report and how it fits with existing things. So this report is driven on legislation will make more properties available for redevelopment in time, and a certain level of infrastructure could be needed, and it's ensuring that the town has a look at what that could be. And I can report from the finance side that all of the immediate short-term ones are in fact in the 5-year financial plan that was just adopted, many of them funded and in process. All the sort of midterm out near the 5-year ones where we're reliant on big grant awards, which the town doesn't have yet, are in there. And certainly a lot of the others that are in that mid-phase 5, 10, 15, 20 years are being looked at, and I guess juggle would be the right way of saying it, because it's not clear what to do next. And so when those 5-year plans roll over and infrastructure department looks at them, it'll become clearer and clearer which ones are the next ones, and clearer which senior government departments are offering grants to help it. And I'll just end with, this report is very useful because in a number of places it makes it really clear for the senior governments that if you wish expanded housing development or renewal here, these things will have to be funded, because the numbers are in the millions. They're not something the local tax base will look after. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and I mean, also the reason I asked about the DCC bylaw right off the bat too is that obviously a lot of these needs are driven by growth, but they're also going to be collecting DCC funding in order to be funded by that growth as well, by our new bylaw. So I think since we're already talking about the next report, maybe we'll go to that, seeing there are no other questions. And this is the One Water strategy. There were no, I mean, this past report's just for information, and it's going to obviously inform a lot of the work going forward, especially the official community plans. So those are next steps for that. And thank you to Urban Systems. I think we might be seeing you again in a matter of seconds, maybe some of you, but I don't know if the cast is going to change. But thank you to anyone who's going to be signing off now. And I'll go to our Director of Infrastructure for the One Water strategy, item 3.2.
Thank you, Mayor White. This also is presented for information. In September 2023, the town of Gibsons and Sunshine Coast Regional District entered the Aquifer 560 watershed agreement. Included in that watershed agreement between the two governments was the commitment to engineering and system optimization study. Through scoping of that optimization study, kind of the One Water strategy emerged, looking at the use of water between the two organizations, but also water in all its forms. So from stormwater to potable water, which also then becomes wastewater as well. So kind of through that lens, we worked with Urban Systems and Waterline Resources to do a bit of a risk assessment of the aquifer and identify some key priorities for kind of long-term planning for the ongoing use of Aquifer 560 as a potable water source. So I'll really let the report speak to itself, but just to key in on the high priority recommendations that came out of that natural asset management based risk assessment were could be kind of characterized as kind of the continued ongoing climate and aquifer monitoring and updated aquifer protection regulations, which will tie into the kind of the next two items on the agenda as well. So we'll start with this one, and then we can get into some of the detail on some of those recommendations and what we've done to date with the next two agenda items. And I'll look to council for our committee for questions.
Great. And is Kendrick still online too? Or are you handling all the questions?
So most of the questions should come to me. We do have Simon and from Waterline Resources and Steve Brubaker from Urban Systems available as well. I believe if they're online, I'm seeing nods, so they should be here as well. There's no presentation, but they're here for questions as well.
Okay. Councillor DeAndrade.
Thank you, Mayor. I have almost a political question, I guess. I understand that the agreement was signed that commits both local governments to jointly expand the monitoring, but the monitoring is something, and then there are recommendations to be implemented. So I'm just in a timely fashion, preferably. So I wonder if there's a need to expand the agreement to focus on the recommendations. I'm just wondering, because obviously I would like to see this implemented in a timely fashion.
Yeah, I've got some questions about the recommendations too, but I'll get to that next till CIO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so in terms of the agreement, as it is written and agreed to, this is exactly the type of follow-up, so we don't see any need to update the agreement at all. In fact, we're in touch with staff at the regional district as well as to do a follow-up discussion on these items as well.
So I guess, yeah, my question is more, when I read through the report, there's a lot on just the, well, it's not a long report, it's quite a readable report, but a lot on just kind of going over the data and the background, and the next steps just is one table at the start. There's not a lot on those next steps, so and I guess some of those next steps are repeated in the staff report, but not all of them. So I'm wondering how we're handling those. Like if we are, like it's almost, I wonder if we almost need another report looking at that one table to elaborate on them a bit more and prioritize them, or if maybe we could, or it might just help to kind of run through them and discuss them.
Yeah, certainly. A lot of the recommendations don't necessarily have capital implications, and a lot of them are also recommendations that would be implemented by the regional district as well. Their recommendations, if you can see on that table on page 15 of the One Water Strategy Report, so I don't know the number in the agenda. It's got the priority ranking and a timeline, and then responsible, and so really everything in there is recommendations for both the town and the regional district. Some are even for the Ministry of Environment, and so our intention was really to provide this for committee for recommendation or for information if there's interest in a little bit more of a synthesis of the recommendations and a more thorough discussion of those, and how to approach the intergovernmental portions of it. Certainly, that could be presented in a follow-up.
Right. Yeah. I guess it does sound like the logical next step, as the CAO said, is a staff-to-staff meeting to kind of go over that page and the report and see what happens next. And yeah, I mean, if there are any. I mean, there might be a couple of pieces on there that might require council action, I don't know, or presentations, but that would be, I guess that would come up later. I've got Councillor Lumley next.
Yeah, thank you. Through the mayor, when I read the report, there was just one thing that I was curious about. Maybe it could be me, but at one stage in the report, it says that the aquifer, the recharge, is like excellent, like super fast, even though it's covered by the aquitard. But then later in the report, it cites high risk of inadequate recharge. I was just kind of maybe get some clarification, Mayor, as to is it really recharging quickly and we have no problems, or is there a high risk of inadequate recharge? I don't know. Just kind of maybe I felt it just kind of contradicted each other, but anyway, just explanation, I guess.
Director of Infrastructure.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I shared the counselor's reaction when I read through this again, just in preparation for the staff report. But the clarification for that is the risk rating is there's a matrix on page 11 of the One Water strategy where risk analysis and risk ratings come out of a combination of the likelihood of occurrence and the consequences of occurrence. And so for the lack of recharge, the likelihood may be low, but the consequences of that would be extreme or very high. And so because the consequences of there being a lack of recharge would be very high, it needs to be treated as a high risk, but the likelihood of that happening is low, and the recommendations are just to do continued monitoring and to continue monitoring for salt intrusion and continue monitoring climate and continue monitoring levels within the aquifer and the well recharge so that we get early indications if the aquifer is starting to show any signs of stress, which right now it is not. But my takeaway from that is it's flagged as a risk because of the consequences, but it's not a high priority action because the likelihood of it happening is not high. And maybe Steve or Simon may have further to add to that if I've kind of missed the mark somewhat, but it's really the two factors that go into a risk ranking.
Yep. Hey, Trevor Simon here with Waterline. Just clarify that section in the introduction that speaks to the recharge potential as being adequate or good stems from the 2013 report where we did where the authors at the time did some good investigation on the water recharge from a chemical perspective. So the water's quite young. It has all the characteristics of a precipitation type water or surface water, so that we have an understanding that the water that's in there is being recharged continuously or somewhat continuously. There obviously is a lag of sorts. Water takes some time, 8 to 30 years, I believe, was in the 2013 report for the water to infiltrate to the aquifer. But as Trevor alluded, I think Trevor, good job there. That's accurate for sure. We kind of flagged it as, hey, if there's inadequate monitoring from a recharge perspective, as you alluded to, Trevor, on table 11 there, that we could potentially see, issues down the line. So I think a great job. That's kind of the contradiction a bit. And maybe, unfortunately that section in that introduction piece could be softened or changed slightly.
Okay, other questions? Seeing none. As our director mentioned, there's a couple of other aquifer-related items here on the protection, aquifer protection, really, that are directly connected to this. So, are you on 3.3 or 3.2, Director DeAndre or Councilor DeAndre?
Just regarding the one water.
Okay,
stuff.
so yeah.
Well, this regards the reporting. I mean, when something that's happening with us here, we get reports from our staff. So I wonder if there will be a framework for reporting, since it's combined with the SRD. I'm just wondering, it's going to be an annual report. It would be nice to have some time that we, council, can follow up the implementation of the recommendations.
CIO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It's an important report, and a sort of this one being our third major aquifer report, and you can see the evolution both of what we're learning, and I want to highlight the value of the monitoring, which continues to be one of our best investments, I would say. In the agreement with the SCRD, under the communications aspect of it, we sort of talked about sort of a state of the aquifer report as often as we can. So we see this is the type of report that it's done not necessarily by us. We provide the data and we get the opinion of these professional folks. We also work with the province on this information. The data in particular will be very important, and that both what we're collecting now and the province has identified some data gaps that we're trying to fill, and I think we have some responses for those. But I can see the frequency of these reports. I guess it's a matter of capacity and time and so on. I don't think it needs to be every few months, but I think, 2 to 3 year basis or something. As things develop, but I think that's the type of information we want to be looking at, not just so much. We heard earlier from what type of infrastructure we have on the ground to support the communities now and into the future, and this is about the water source we're relying, what shape it's in, and so on. So it all goes together, I guess, in the end. But I don't know if that answer your question.
Councillor D'Andrade.
Thank you, Mayor. This is just a clarification. When I mentioned about supply capacity, at this point, I didn't say that 10,000 is the cap for population. This is under low risk given the impacts of climate change. And this report clearly says climate change and altering weather patterns have the potential to change the outlook on groundwater availability through reduced groundwater recharge. Aquifer 560 is vulnerable to loss of quantity if not properly monitored. So my only observation regarding the other report is why something so important. I understand that we are not committing to the high scenario. How do you say but it just makes me nervous that the urban forest report it's mentioned on the document, but our aquifer report is not. So anyways, I would like to have something that said, this is conditional to ongoing studies like we are doing, because when you see the other report, it just shows like, hey, we can go ahead. The only issue we have is capacity, like infrastructure capacity. So anyways, it's good to have a document that involves all the key information. Thank you.
Just on next steps with the One Water strategy, is that staff-to-staff meeting? I heard there's some interest, some positive response from the SCRD. Is it scheduled? Is there a meeting scheduled? Is it coming together?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes. Hoping to do that. I think we have a date for later this month.
Awesome. And moving on to 3.3, which is the Leapfrog model update and annual groundwater monitoring. And this was a lot of work done by our natural asset technician.
To the Mayor, Michelle should be online and to introduce the report.
Andrew, is Michelle Lewis on there? Okay. There she is. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, sorry, I had to get promoted to panelist last minute. Just bear with me, I'm working off a laptop, so. I didn't have much time for this exit full screen. There we go. Okay, so this purpose of the report is to provide an update on the two initiatives. The Leapfrog model update, which is the 3D conceptual model that was used by Waterline in 2013 in our original mapping study, and another update to the annual monitoring program. As the monitoring program is now a decade in, we decided to take not a different approach, but just to dive deeper and looking at trends with water levels and just reporting out what we're seeing happen over the past decade, now that we have this sufficient and extensive data. So first I'll start with the Leapfrog model update. It's obviously all in the report, but conclusions are, the two big ones were that one of them was that the aquifer, through information obtained from DPA 9 applications, which are aquifer protection development permit area applications. The drilling data and hydrogeological data was put into the model, which gave us a broader sense of the extent of the aquifer, which is shown in figures 1 from the 2021 and figures 2 from the 2024. The extent and with this additional data, drilling data, we found that the boundary between the Gibsons and the Somes aquifer lobe has been is showing that it is. We're more confident that it is disconnected, and that's through. That was important for us to look at, considering that the SCRD has wells in the Somes lobe, and we wanted to see the connection, or if there was any connection between the Somes and Gibsons lobe. For the 2024 annual groundwater monitoring report, a lot of the stuff was the same as we do every year, looking at well conditions and obviously looking at water quality, water levels. But then, like I mentioned, just also looking at what the trends are and if we're seeing anything kind of out of the ordinary over the past 10 years. And I will point out that one of the interesting findings was because when well 6 in Upper Gibsons came online, we all know that it changed from the town servicing 73% of the population of Gibsons to servicing 100% of the population, excluding some fire flows, etc. And of course, this resulted in a slight decrease in the water levels seen in the monitoring wells close to town well 6, but that was expected and is not indicative of decreasing aquifer levels as a whole. It's just in that area and was to be expected because of that increased population demand. And we will continue to see those levels level out. Water use, the town has experienced 5.1 increase, 1% increase in water demand, but again, that's since 2021, and there's population growth and also that zone 3 coming online to the town's water system. Our licensed total volume, which is 1.014 million cubic meters, is still well below 80% of the annual license volume. Water quality has remained constant. And then next steps are just recommendations for part of our annual groundwater monitoring to do with monitoring wells, looking at well conditions, continuing obviously with collecting the information and looking at the creeks and interactions between surface and groundwater. And I think I'll leave it at there, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Questions? Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White, and through you. Something that sort of continually keeps coming up is the collection of precipitation for gardens and rather than using potable water for lawns and other garden functions and food growing. Has there been any sort of study done relative to if people are massively collecting precipitation that's not getting into the ground and not getting into the streams? Is that potential, is it being considered in any of the studies that are being done?
Through you, Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
Or is there somebody else with a hand up there?
There is, but we'll defer to you first and we'll see if he's got anything to add.
Okay, who is it? Is it Trevor?
Is it Trevor? No, apparently not. It's not Trevor.
I would say short answer is no, that there hasn't been studies on that. And my opinion would be that it would have to be quite a significant scale of water capture that is being diverted from the aquifer for any impacts. But I defer to the mystery person with their hand up.
Yeah, I'll just randomly ask if the Director of Infrastructure Services has anything to add.
Well, as a matter of fact, Michelle said it quite well. Really, the scale of any diversion of rainwater to have an impact on the aquifer recharge is well beyond what the town would be able to produce from what we're able, as far as our understanding, with the how thick the aquitard is and how much land mass there is between where the residents are and the aquifer. The vast majority of recharge, based on our understanding, is from the top of Mount Elphinstone, and as it makes its way down the slope, we would expect, or our understanding is there's very, very little recharge that's happening once you enter the kind of the boundary of town, in terms of that being the primary source of recharge. The creek would be again, that would be a potential source of higher infiltration into the aquifer, but again, looking at how much water flows through the creek and how much would be diverted for a rain barrel collection system, which would end up spilling during a heavy rainfall anyways and likely draining out, it would be minimal and really likely negligible, if every town or house in town had a rain harvesting barrel.
It's interesting that as we learn more about the aquifer, we're being more protective in some areas, like in this bylaw that's coming up, but in other areas we're learning maybe we don't need to be. I think we used to have signs up all over town saying aquifer recharge area, but it doesn't necessarily, I think what we're learning is there's not necessarily damage to or potential for that within the town boundaries, is what I'm hearing. Yeah, Director of Infrastructure.
One of the recommendations, and with the three kind of large reports that we have in this agenda from Waterline, I'm not 100% certain which one it's in at this moment, but there was I think it may have been in the One Water strategy, there was a recommendation to revisit the aquifer flow model. So there's a lot of different models and there's a lot of analysis that's gone into this, but the flow model would be what are all of the inputs into the aquifer and what are all of the outputs out of the end of it. And that's a tool that's used to analyze the capacity of the aquifer and what is sustainable, what could be drawn from that sustainably. And I think that is a recommendation that staff will certainly be looking to implement in coming work plans. And that would certainly be an important piece of the conversation for the town to have with the province when it comes time to applying for a new water license. Just in that sense, the recharge is certainly due for a reassessment.
And I see our natural asset technician has her hand up.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and to your point on recharge and the shift in our thinking or maybe our considerations of recharge, that's one of the focuses that staff is looking at with Waterline and moving forward now that we have this decade worth of data. And, when we know that looking at the trends of water levels and water quality, that we're not seeing impacts from contamination and then we're not seeing saltwater intrusion or even like the possibility of that with current practices. And so the shift now is more looking at, okay, we could put more research into where the aquifer recharge areas are, like the actual recharge points. We know, potentially, like the Director of Infrastructure said, that it's at the southern slopes of Mount Elphinstone, where we know that there's this band of gravel, and but to be able to pinpoint where these locations would be, which would be a little more helpful in looking at protecting from pollution and also making sure that we're not redirecting water from these areas that are important to recharge.
Yeah, I've got a lineup now of questions, and Councillor Thompson's first.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. With respect to the data gaps that still exist to inform the leapfrog model, is that data that's based out of a linear time model? Is that how those data gaps get met? It's just needing more time? Or is it relative to the different information that you're still collecting from the field at the different areas? Is that like asking how long is a piece of string?
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and Waterline may be able to speak to this a bit too, but the data gaps are just location and drilling geological data. So, we have a good sense of depth of aquifer, depth of aquitard in all the locations that we have drilling data from, but then the gaps are literally location based where we don't have that information. And so a lot of the extent of the aquifer has just been extrapolated based on the information that we do have. So I think on the report I can't remember which report it was in, but we put in like an image from this update just showing where our actual data location points are, and based on that, and like, so more drilling information gives us better information about the depth, more accurate information.
Thanks. And just checking if Waterline has anything to add.
Nope, I think that's about right. I think, Michelle, your figure you're referencing is figure 3 of the leapfrog. One of your points was the connection between the Soames lobe and the Gibsons lobe. So that's the well field of the SCRD versus the well field of the town. But we only have two physical wells that drill down to the aquifer between that space by Gibsons Creek. So although, Councillor, I think your question was, is it a time thing? It's not a time thing, it's a location. If we could have more than 2, maybe 5, I mean, there's no specific number, then the model could interpret better the spacing or the thickness of the aquifer as it pinches out between that location. So 2 points isn't really a good enough spacing. It does give you an idea, but such as in Lower Gibsons, where all the DP data comes from, there's probably 10 to 30 to 50 points. So, you get much more, better resolution. So, yeah. So, yeah, exactly, Michelle. More points, better data, better results.
Director of Infrastructure Services.
Thanks. And through the mayor, just a little bit more to add to that too. I think one thing that differentiates this as well from the previous model is we were able to get some groundwater data from our colleagues at the regional district as well. So the model expands somewhat to follow the shape of the aquifer, which extends well beyond the town boundary. So some of the data gaps are just where it kind of stitching the portions of the aquifer together, and some of the boundary condition areas between the Gibsons lobe and the Soames lobe, or between the Elphinstone lobe and the Gibsons lobe, just to better delineate those. So it's almost like the more we know now, we've identified where we still have a bit more to learn. So I think and there's a summary of some of the recommendations to close some of those data gaps, and it looks like 3 of the 4 are kind of trying in those boundary areas.
Hey, Councillor Kroll, thanks for the wait. Weren't you the second one? Okay, Councillor D'Andrade. I'm jumping to the third person, I thought, yeah.
This is on next steps. I was just curious because there's a step that is, once the 2025 annual groundwater monitoring is complete, consider reassessing against the modeling. And I was just wondering, is it something that would be ready by the end of 26? Once you have the data, and just about modeling is a quick thing. So I was wondering if this council is still going to see the results.
Natural Assets Technician.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So just to give you a sense of timing, so the 2020, the annual groundwater monitoring usually occurs in September, where a water line comes out to Gibsons itself and collects all the data from all the wells and does condition assessments of the wells as well. And then we usually get the report sometime in I'd say like Q1 of the following year. And so like the 2025 report we would receive in Q1 of 2026. So yeah, I would assume that within that next year, 2026, that this is something that we could bring back to council.
Exciting. Thank you.
Great. Okay, well, I'm seeing no more questions, so I think we can move on to the next water report, which is the Aquifer Protection Regulation update. And this one will actually have a recommendation to it. I'll just go to our Director of Infrastructure Services for intro to this.
Thank you, Mayor White. So this is a follow-up on the presentation that staff made in July of last year. Hard to believe it's already been almost a year since we were last discussing this issue in here. What we've presented is the new proposed draft bylaw. There's in July of last year, part of the update for the updating DPA 9 recommendation was through our analysis of that development permit area and the way that it works and the way that the development permit regulates land use versus a bylaw. It became apparent that the bylaw itself was going to be in some ways a better tool for some of the things that we're looking to regulate, and that creating a new distinct bylaw would give the attention to the protection regulation and help just clarify and kind of take it out from just our typical water regulation bylaw. So what we've proposed here is the development of a new bylaw. That bylaw would be specific to aquifer protection. There would be some secondary amendments to other impacted bylaws were this to advance, and we're still on moving towards the new aquifer protection development permit area to be included in an OCP update. So that's at a high level. I won't get into the weeds of the bylaw itself. I'll let the questions from committee kind of direct that conversation. But just at a high level, the way that we see this proposed bylaw being implemented, I thought about putting in a flow chart. I just couldn't find a good way to kind of present that information. So I may just kind of talk through the process-wise how we see this working versus our old regulation, and then I'll open it up to committee for questions. So the current regulation, any sort of ground disturbance on a parcel that's within the aquifer protection sub-area, any ground disturbance deeper than 1.5 meters would trigger the need for a development permit under DPA 9, as well as a drilling permit under our water service regulation bylaw 1192. And the two are reviewed and issued concurrently. So there's some just administrative redundancy between the two regulations, and there's not a lot of clarity within the bylaw as to what is allowed and what's not allowed. And it's very much just written for the director of the department to have discretion on what is and is not permitted. And there's certain administrative challenges with that. And we've identified, I feel like internally we feel quite good about the kind of the new bylaw and process-wise, and that there's a lot more administrative clarity contained within it, and it should streamline the process and make it easier for people reviewing those applications to say yes or no to a proposed bit of work. So the concept leading into this is the first key priority is identifying what the depth of the aquitard, the depth of the aquifer, and the condition of the aquifer below a particular parcel, so that any future investigative works can be designed with that in mind, so that future geotechnical exploration doesn't negatively impact the aquifer. So the first step would be for an applicant to get a hydrogeological investigation permit. That would be administered under the bylaw. That would allow an applicant to bring in functionally a well drilling rig, drill some monitoring wells, confirm what the aquifer conditions are for the parcel. They'll know the depth of it, they'll know some of the soil characteristics. Then they can develop their geotechnical investigation program, so they can confirm the soil bearing capacity and all the soil conditions they need to actually design a foundation. They can then apply for that geotechnical permit that would be limited to exploring the area above the aquifer. So there's no risk that their drilling program is going to penetrate into the aquifer, and particularly in lower Gibsons in the sub-area, as we've delineated sub-area 1, where the aquifer is in artesian condition. No risk of potential breach of the aquifer or contamination. Once they complete all of their geotechnical work, they would then proceed with the site development, and then there would be an application for a development permit. Likely that would come with the application for a building permit. The development permit would allow them to develop the site. And then there would be a third permit issued under the bylaw regulation that would allow them to actually excavate to install the servicing and build a foundation. That third permit would be issued based on an excavation plan that would be prepared, that would be based on the building plans. We would review the geotechnical investigation, we'd review the hydrogeotechnical investigation, confirm that the depths that's proposed for their excavation don't exceed the depths to the top of the aquifer or top of the aquitard, depending on the conditions, and they would get their approval to proceed with the development. So it's giving some clear checkpoints for the developers to kind of pass through before to confirm that they're safe to proceed with their next phase of the development, or development planning. And rather than having it all kind of come at one package, which there's a lot to tease out, and there's very little direction for the applicants as well as the reviewers as to what they should and shouldn't be approving. So that was the intention. It may seem like there's more regulation because now we're saying there's 3 permits instead of 1, but I think that the applicants will find that the permitting process is much clearer. And the idea and what we've proposed with, or conceptually what we've been thinking about in terms of permitting fees, they would be, the permit fee for the hydrogeological investigation would be the highest, and they'd get less and less as they go because there's more data that the town already has available, so the reviews should get quicker and quicker as they proceed towards the excavation permit. I've probably explained enough. I'll look to you, and happy to get into either the report and the process between the bylaw and the DP, or some of the content of the bylaw as well. Thank you.
Councillor D'Andrade.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think this is amazing. I think it's going to help a lot, everybody, even council. One thing, with regard to, for example, Lower Gibsons, 1.5 meters, is it this number cut in stone? And if I come with a proposal that is 1.6, I don't have a chance, or this is just more or less a guideline? And then if I come, okay, my building really has to be a 1.6 or 7, there is a chance for more investigation. I'm just trying to have a sense.
Thank you. And through the mayor, those depths would be hard triggers for the regulation. The 1.5 meters for the lowest area, for the sub-area 1, that's consistent with what's currently in place in bylaw 1192 as well as DPA 9. So we've maintained that. There are areas, certainly the aquifer is not 1.5 meters deep, but there's areas where it's very shallow, and that's staff wouldn't be comfortable going any deeper than that for this particular part of town. It's also possible, depending on what the nature of the development is, where they may not have a need for all 3 of those steps. They may be able to complete step 1, confirm that the aquifer is 3.5 meters deep on their property. They only wanted a foundation of 1.8 meters, and that might be the end of it until they get their excavation permit. So we're not saying that they have to go through all 3 of these stages, but for a larger scale development, this would be the process.
Thank you. Councillor Lumley.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I guess maybe this goes towards your point, but when I looked at the, I think it was the bylaw, I was quite, and it goes to your point by saying maybe before we were like this ultimate concern, not that we shouldn't be, but the sub area 3, which is quite close to downtown, where I think it's just a block or a block and a half up from South Fletcher. I mean, your ground permit, your disturbance permit can be 30 meters, which is quite deep, but I guess that's just a matter of more knowledge or about the aquifer, I would imagine, because it would, before that, and I know it's a bylaw and everything, but before that, like, I would almost guess that would not even be possible, this close to the other sub areas, but, yeah, I don't know if there's an explanation or just that is what it is.
Director?
Thank you. Through the mayor, so the boundaries of the sub areas are based on, and there's some logic to the sequencing of our reporting on the agenda. So the updated aquifer groundwater model produced a updated depth to the aquifer map. So we have updated information based on the updated groundwater model, which says, from surface to the aquifer, based on all the data that we have that mapped. And so we've created these boundaries from the sub areas to reflect the known data that we have about the depth to the aquifer. And we've given ourselves a factor of safety. So, maybe at the top of the area of sub area 1, it allows you to drill or to dig 1.5 meters. When you get into sub area 2, it allows you to dig 5 meters before triggering a permit. But the aquifer depth is in the range of 10 meters in that area. So we've given ourselves a factor of safety. And then the same way you move up to sub area 2-3, the boundary, it's certainly, the aquifer is deeper than 30 meters in that location. It's just that's what we're willing to comfortably approve without triggering the permitting requirements in the process of just confirming what that is. So I can appreciate that it's a bit of an abrupt change from 5 meters to 30 meters. We were also not wanting to overdo the sub areas and make it overly complex by having 5 sub areas as you work your way up the hill. Part of the rationale with the 30-meter threshold was there's for particular type and scale of development, there can be a building code requirement to confirm what the without getting too into the weeds, some of the seismic conditions of the soil of a site is, and to do that, they drill to a depth of 30 meters. So we wanted to allow that standard typical geotechnical investigation in Upper Gibsons without causing any what would be unnecessary regulatory hurdles. But if somebody wanted to do something beyond that depth, which would be unusual, that might be something like a geothermal heat exchange. Certainly, if they want to be drilling any deeper than that, then that's where we would trigger the regulations and just make sure that it's being done in a safe and responsible way.
I think he's done, yeah. Okay, Councillor D'Andretti.
Thank you, Mayor. It's just a clarification, because when I read, it's page 4 of the report, when I read sub-area 3, it says encompasses the remaining of the land within the town, excluding areas where bedrock is at the very near surface. Example, the Bluff and Gospel Rock. And I thought these are the areas that are area 3, sub-area 3 as well. Should the word be including? Otherwise, I don't understand what it means.
Thank you. Through the mayor, thanks for pointing that out. I actually just noticed that myself, that we had discussed updating the map just to eliminate the areas that are very obviously bedrock, because we know that the aquifer doesn't exist in those areas. So that's something that we can tidy up with the final version of this before it's brought to council. There's no need to regulate drilling on the bluff because we know that the aquifer isn't present because of the bedrock.
Thank you.
Councillor Lumley.
I just had a couple other the draft bylaw questions, if I could, through the mayor. The certificate of insurance prior to getting a permit, how is that determined, the level of insurance? What, certain risks with obviously occur when you're going to get a development permit to do groundwork. How is that determined? What's the level of insurance? Does it include, or does it have some sort of caveat that based on the potential damage for possibly exceeding some of the requirements within the permit? I was just wondering how the level of insurance gets calculated.
Director?
Thank you. Through the mayor, MIABC, Municipal Insurance Agency of BC, has a insurance risk or matrix. I don't know exactly what they call it, but it's functionally a matrix where staff of municipality can look at the type of work that they're engaging, whether it be for their own contractor or third-party work. And depending on what the type of work is and the order of cost, it'll recommend what level of insurance the contractor should be carrying. So we rely on that matrix when we make decisions for our own contract work or for reviewing third party. So that would be, our intention would be to use that, but it does raise an interesting question, and that's one that we could reach out to MIABC specifically to talk about the type of work that we're talking about regulating under this, and see if they would have any recommendations, because it likely doesn't fall within a category that perfectly is captured by their risk table. So we can review that, and that would be worth reaching out to staff from MIABC.
Thank you. And again, through the mayor, the other one, I think I always ask these questions with respect to bylaws and so on and so forth, but the fine, the $5,000 fine, it seems really low to me. And again, I mean, maybe it's a limitation of some kind, but if someone could almost calculate that, well, why would I get all these reports done? Or why am I going to hire these? Like maybe I'll be able to get away with it for $5,000 fine. Like, I'm not sure. Like I like to think humans are a little better than that, but I know some aren't. So I just wondered if the fine could be again graduated based on or even increased to just at a level where you might think, okay, well, people are going to proceed with the process instead of maybe risking it for a small fine.
I guess I'd add to that question too is, I mean, I know there are provincial restrictions on our fines, and that even came up at LMLGA and advocacy trying to increase them. But additionally, could there be other ramifications for somebody who like not only are they vulnerable, not only will he be fined, but maybe there could be legal action or something too. I mean, I'll ask that. Yeah.
Yeah. So through the mayor, the language in here, there's notwithstanding section 7118, any person who is guilty of obstructing the director or officer or their appointed designates while performing their duties, liable upon conviction of a fine not less than $2,000 or imprisonment for not more than 6 months, and the cost of prosecutions. I don't know what hurdles the town would have to jump to be able to actually act on that language in the bylaw, and I will not in any way try to pass myself off as someone who's an expert in bylaw and fine regulations. So I don't know if the director of planning or the corporate officer might have more insight on how those fine limitations are, but that's certainly something that we intend to pursue and just confirm what's the maximum that we would be able to fine within that, and that would be our intention to proceed with whatever maximum is available.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, are we ready to put forward the recommendation? I see moved by Councillor Kroll and seconded by Councillor Thompson, which is the recommendation on the agenda to move ahead with this aquifer protection bylaw, that it be referred to for a legal and technical review and brought back to council. Any further discussion on this? All those in favor? The motion carries. And could we just have a 2-minute break before we move to the planning issues? Yeah. Sounds good. All right, let's move on to our planning issues. 3.5, which is zoning amendment for a place of worship at 287 Gower Point Road. We've got a staff report. Options are on page 10, and I don't know if there's any presentation.
There is a
There is.
presentation.
Excellent. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. The town has received an application for a zoning amendment for Unit 219 located at 287 Gower Point Road to allow for the continued use of the unit as a church. The purpose of the report is to obtain direction on rezoning the site to allow a site-specific permission for a place of worship in the downtown Commercial 5 zone for Unit 219-287 Gower Point Road. The site plan shows the location of the key building where the church is located, outlined in yellow, and the parking lot next door is outlined in blue. Christ the King Community Church has maintained continual use of the Unit 219 since early 2007. There have been previous applications for the site through temporary zoning amendments, temporary use permits, and development variance permits. The space is used for public assembly for the purpose of worship services and church administrative offices. Christ the King Community Church has applied to continue its current use as a place of worship permanently. The church has 200 regular attendees and holds a weekly worship gathering on Sundays, as well as community-oriented activities throughout the week. The site is zoned as downtown commercial C5 and is surrounded by other commercially zoned sites. The intent of the zone is to permit a wide range of commercial uses and apartment uses in parts of the Gibsons Landing area designated as in the mixed-use residential commercial category by the land use plan of the official community plan for use on the uphill side of the street. The property is designated as mixed-use commercial as shown in the figure. The intent of this designation is to allow for a wide range of retail and office use, restaurant and visitor accommodations in a pedestrian-oriented environment, and to allow residential uses as a secondary use above or under commercial use at ground level. The OCP's intent for the Gibsons Landing is to be a bustling center of small-scale, local, and tourism-based commercial activity. Staff have assessed the proposal with the goals and objectives in the official community plan and have pulled the following policies that are relevant to the proposal. The Harbor Area Plan provides key policies that support the zoning amendment, such as Goal 4, supporting social and cultural activities, specifically upgrading and adding cultural facilities, as well as Goal 5, which is to ensure economic viability, specifically in promoting year-round commercial activity, encouraging institutional uses as community anchors, supporting a mix of community uses, and maintaining a mix of year-round uses. Based on the above policy, staff conclude that the proposal is consistent with the official community plan. To permit the church use in the zoning bylaw, a site-specific use for a place of worship is added to the downtown commercial 5 zone for the unit. This amendment would legitimize the currently non-conforming use that has been in place through temporary provision since 2007. A covenant was registered in 2008 on the parking lot next to the key building to ensure that the land must not be used for any other purpose except for to provide parking for the key building, its successors, and assigns lessees and agents and servants, tenants, invitees, and licenses. The 2007 development variance permit reduced the parking requirements from 92 spaces to 73. The church, with 198 seats currently, requires 40 parking spaces. In 1996, when the current church space was used as a cabaret, the town granted a shared parking permission since the operating hours for the cabaret were at night and the businesses in the key building were open during the day. Similarly, the applicant is requesting to share the parking spaces for the church and the businesses and has confirmed that the hours of operation for the church are outside regular store hours at the Key Building. An updating parking calculation requires 91 parking spaces, however, there's only 73 spaces available. Staff consider that sharing the parking is reasonable since it has operated in that way in the past, and there have been no bylaw complaints related to the church use as a result. To secure parking for the Key Building, covenants should be registered on the title of both the Key Building property and the parking lot. The Key Building covenant should require the use of the church to remain at the different operating hours than the other uses at 287 Gower Point Road, as well as to add to the covenant that if future hours of the church are expanded, then adequate parking for the uses would need to be provided as per the bylaw requirements at that time. The parking lot covenant should require no building on the site without accommodating the needs of the Key Building parking requirements at 287 Gower Point Road. The covenants would need to be registered on title before the adoption of the zoning amendment. The application was referred to the fire department and circulated to internal departments for comments. There were no concerns raised. There are 4 options for council's consideration: consult with the public through a public information meeting, waive the public hearing and notify the public of first reading, give the bylaw first and second reading, and schedule a public hearing, or option 4 is to deny the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. First up, I've got Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White. This is a question I had, and to you, Mayor White, but I think it's something that staff may be required to answer. The church has been existing, using that space without a zoning change. They have an existing space on Gower Point Road where they have a church and they receive permissive tax credits. If we change the zoning for this space to a place of worship, is that going to trigger that space becoming subject to a permissive tax credit?
I think I can answer that. No, it doesn't trigger it. It doesn't trigger it automatically became subject, but my understanding from our last experience is that even though they don't own it, an application can come forward for a permissive tax credit, because there was one last time that we actually denied. That was an application for a leased space, and I think our Director of Finance will probably be able to answer this question best. Because otherwise, usually we have exemptions for properties that the applicants actually own, but last time we had one that was somebody leasing the space, this would be the case in this scenario where they could apply, but it wouldn't be automatic. Yeah.
Through Mayor White, nothing would be automatic, but as a religious organization, they could make an application.
So, in follow-up to that, so if, like, I have no problem per se with Christ the King using that space as a church, but I would have issue if we change the zoning and then they apply for a permissive tax credit, which is putting an additional tax burden on the community, having to sort of pick up that tab. So, and the fact that it is I'm assuming they rent the space from the current owner of the building. And there's major issues with the parking, which I don't really want to get into, but.
Well, I'm sure it's gonna be touched on this. Yeah, I'm sure people are raring to go on to talk about that. People are lining up, yeah. But, I mean, we'll probably have a pretty fulsome discussion here, I think, but is there more on the tax exemption piece?
Yeah,
Director
Mayor
of
White, I
Finance?
just wanted to clarify, a property could be zoned anything. It's the nature of the organization that's using the property that opens up the possibility of tax exemptions.
Mm-hmm. Councillor Lumley.
Yeah, thank you. Through the mayor, I guess that was like a question of mine. And some of my question was that if they applied for it, would it extend to the use of the whole rezoned property? Like, the one issue is that it's rezoned right down to the waterfront. And another question I had was, do rental properties, do they pay, like, are they considered a business? Like, if the person that owns the building is renting it out to a non, like, to a place of worship, is that considered a business? Like, are they paying like the multiplier, like, for tax purposes, or how does that work?
I assume that would still be because of the zoning, but I'll go to Director of Finance to confirm.
Through Mayor White, if there's no exemption in existence, everything would be as normal regardless of who's owning, who's leasing. If you had a situation, a commercial property, and a portion of it was being used by a residential organization and a local government had granted them a permissive tax exemption for that portion of the property, what would happen is the property owner would get their tax bill, and the portion of the property that was taxable would be based on the commercial rates for taxation, and there just wouldn't be any tax on the portion that was eligible for the PTE. And again, eligible is a misleading word, because eligible means nothing without a council approval on top of it.
Okay, I've got Councillor Thompson next.
Thank you, Mayor. With the rezoning, we consider the reduction in parking, and the staff report noted that the parking reduction had worked in the past, and I would agree with that, but it's changed, and I just wanted to draw attention to the recent changes made by the property owner that is now locking the lots at 6 p.m. 7 days a week. We've received some phone calls and emails about the negative effects on the neighboring business community, the staff, their customers. So this recent decision to lock that lot off at 6 p.m. is now having a direct effect on how that area is functioning. And I think based on that, it's very important that we hear from the local business community before moving ahead on the parking considerations of this rezoning.
Okay, yeah, I have my own thoughts, but I'll go to Councillor D'Andretti. You haven't spoken on this, right? Okay, sure, Councillor Kroll.
Well, sort of further to what Councillor Thompson was addressing is, we've given other businesses in the lower village permissive tax credits because they do work with the business community in sharing parking. And for clarification, the only part of this property that is being considered for the tax exemption would be that footprint of what was at one time Elfie's Cabaret. So it's not the businesses, it's just that second level of the building. And the parking lot would still have a value that would be subject to taxation, is that correct?
Director of Finance.
Mayor White, unless the lease carved out a section of parking spaces in the parking lot, that's how an exemption could impact that. But if it was just a lease that said second floor, nothing else, then that's what the exemption would be based on. And yeah, because all of those leases get sent to BC Assessment, and that's how they partition the properties.
Okay, follow up, Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White. I believe under federal legislation, it's only the place of worship that qualifies for a permissive tax credit. Parking lots and additional land does not.
Sorry, there is an added complication in this one because it's a religious organization, but I'm not sure that's going to fall into a statutory exemption unless that religious organization owns the property. But it's a tricky one.
Councillor Lumley. Oh, sorry. Councillor D'Andretti first.
Thank you, Mayor. My concern is, starting with the C5 zone, we create zones because we have needs. And this zone, as even the report says, the intent is to permit a wide range of commercial uses and some apartment use. But the report even says the OCP intent for Gibsons Land is to be a bustling center of small-scale local and tourism-based commercial activity. So this is a space that I consider that we need for commercial, because commercial not only bring the taxes, but they also bring revenue to the town overall. And that's my concern. I know they have not had any negative impact right now. And actually, I want to know if we can consider a temporary use permit, because my concern is council has even voiced concerns with the economic viability of the harbor. We know we need to look at that because, even in the last report we had, there's not too much, the economy, there is some obviously going on, but it's not the level that I think we can have. And that's my concern of organizations that don't, obviously they have a tremendous positive impact in the community. But as our strategic plan talks about, we need an economically thriving harbor. And that's my concern in making a decision that's going to have a long-term impact and having not a business there. So that's my first concern.
Yeah, just I'll project a bit where I'm going with this. I'm more, because it's a convenient now, because I do tend to agree with Councillor DeAndrade's statement on this more than anyone else I've heard, in that I think we need to really look at. I think the things have been fine, and there has been some positive aspects of having Sunday traffic there, and the community activity. But when I kind of look at it from a purely planning standpoint and standing back, I tend to agree with the vision that Councillor DeAndrade just laid out more than what I read in the staff report, as far as economic activity in the harbor, and regardless of what operation is in that building, regardless of who owns the building. I see it as commercial making sense there. And that's what we have to do, as our job as council, is stepping back and looking at that. I think to not, also just to look at some of the history, I'm really concerned about the parking arrangement. I'm also, I feel like I'm missing a bit of information. I would like to, I'm really curious about how there were 2 temporary use permits, and then there's just this gap. And I don't know much about, I guess I lived in town maybe for the second one, but I don't recall much about those applications for the TOPs and kind of what the councils of those days, their impressions were, if this was really, they obviously decided to go the temporary route then. And councils can always change their positions, but I feel like it was probably, it probably made sense at that time to do this just temporarily, which is, but still with the intent that over time, the commercial zoning would be retained. That's kind of what I look at the history as probably being that decision making being, and I may have to call up some previous councillors or something to ask them for to mine their memory. But yeah, I'm more inclined, and I guess the third thing is I'm concerned about the parking too. But it's more that kind of when I look at that 2007 arrangement of sharing parking over different operating hours, that obviously is totally out the window now. And that arrangement that was made about this kind of in the staff report of the parking supporting business activities in the daytime and then shifting over to the nighttime. as kind of an operating understanding, and now that's not, that's, as of recent weeks, that is no longer being upheld, that 2007 arrangement, which is really unfortunate. And I think when I look to the future of our community and the harbor, we do want to have activities supported there in the evening as well as during the day. I'll go to Councillor Lumley next, just had his hand up, and then Councillor Kroll.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that. And being on council for this long, I think it was always, I even think like when we first, like way back when, it was almost as, you know, I mean, the owners of the building been in the community for so long. I think it was almost like a favor to them to be able to like temporarily rent out this building that would otherwise sit empty. And yeah, like it would obviously bring a few people down, but I think the cultural interpretation is a bit of a stretch because it's like a one religion, it's 1 day a week, but I think the idea was that in the back of everyone's minds was that there will be a redevelopment based on the OCP that currently exists and like with the updated OCP. And personally, I'd like to retain it as mixed use because you could see that whole area, you know, growing. And as far as businesses and other types of hubs in there, so yeah, I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem extending the permits or getting them to stay in there, but I don't know how much I'd be in favor of rezoning that whole piece of property. So,
Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White. I'm going to circle back to a comment I made with the first report we received today. Is it was pointed out, and to Councillor D'Andretti's point, this is a very potentially vibrant commercial area. We are looking at proposed housing development in these areas. Nothing has come to fruition yet, but there are commercial services that are lacking in this area, and I referenced them this morning or earlier today: the bank, the pharmacy, the grocery store. And I agree with everyone that this should remain a active commercial zone and not lose such a large footprint to a very restrictive zoning that would be probably very difficult to turn around in the future. The parking is a huge concern. It's, I know it's impacted on local businesses who are open at night, who have had customers that have had to call the tow company to bail them out. It's also impacted on marine search and rescue. We had some of our members get caught in the parking lot while they were out on a mission rescuing people. So it's challenging, but I would certainly move that the option 4, that the request be denied, and certainly have no objection to the church continuing to rent the space under the existing condition.
Yeah, I guess, okay, we've got a seconder for that. Any further discussion on this? Councillor D'Andretti?
I think one thing that may, because of our update of DPA 9, which is great, but it might even restrict development footage, maybe something that could be 3 floors, now it's going to be only 2 floors or something like that. So I think protecting commercial space, it's very important. And I would like the OCP, just corroborating what Councillor Kroll said, that we look at that too. Perhaps we need to expand. And I understand that in Upper Gibsons, maybe there's a more available commercial space, but there is different. The bakery, I mean, this is something people are not going to order bread online, hopefully. So I think they're a key of certain business and all these restaurants and places that people can meet as well for entertainment. This is key. This is the area that people go. So I think it's important that the OCP also consider commercial areas, perhaps even expanding. I'm not sure, but that has to be looked at.
Yeah, I think, it's unfortunate that really, I mean, I did, when I first saw this was coming, I did give our planning department some input, like, can we find some kind of other option, middle ground? And I think they tried really hard, and instead we've just got the kind of, we either go ahead with the rezoning in some way or other, or we say no. So I think we're stuck with this. There was no middle ground that could be found, and I think we should probably vote. But you've got Councillor DeAndretti has a Hail Mary.
No, Mayor, because the answer, I asked the question that has not been answered. Can we provide another TUP, extend another TUP? Because for the,
Yeah, that's what I asked. And, I mean, that would be an option here if that were the case, so that's why, yeah.
Through the mayor. So a temporary use permit, the legislation says you can have a temporary use permit for 3 years and it can be extended once. And so they've had their TUP for 3 years and it was extended once. So that term is over now and they wanted to stay here in perpetuity, so they applied for rezoning to secure their zoning.
Okay, to vote on the motion, all those in favor? The motion carries. And now to move to 3.6, which is a zoning amendment to allow arcades. I'll go to our planning department on that.
Thank you, Mayor. The town of Gibsons is considering a zoning bylaw amendment to allow arcades as a permitted use in commercial areas. Currently, arcades are effectively prohibited due to restrictions limiting businesses to a maximum of 3 game machines per 55 square meters. In response to a recent business inquiry and public feedback, particularly from youth, town staff recommend 3 amendments to allow arcades in Gibsons. Number 1, update definition of service commercial use to include arcades. Number 2, remove limitation of game machines in all zones. And number 3, include new prohibition on more than 3 game machines intended for gambling. This proposed amendment supports the town's strategic goals and official community plan by promoting inclusive, accessible, and youth-oriented recreational spaces. Arcades offer affordable, non-sport, indoor entertainment that can engage people of all ages, especially those who may not participate in other recreation programs. The change also supports local entrepreneurship and economic growth by expanding permitted commercial activities. Should the Committee of the Whole endorse the recommendations in this report, a zoning amendment bylaw will be forwarded to Council for consideration at a future meeting. 3 options are proposed. Option 1, publish a first reading notice and proceed through to first reading. Option 2, to give the bylaw first and second reading and schedule a public hearing. And option 3 is to maintain the status quo. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Council? Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White. I think staff heard from students when they were at the high school for the OCP, which is mentioned in the report. But Councillor Giandretti and I, when we were interviewing the potential alternate students on council, both the students we interviewed were quite passionate about the fact that unless you're sort of sports oriented, there's no hubs for gathering or places to meet or for social engagement. I did have a look online, and there's a lot of other communities that have gaming areas. I know for a fact people currently at Tim's and Starbucks play board games. There's quite active groups that meet regularly, which potentially might move into a new area. But a lot of the communities, they have become very successful hubs. I remember some time ago, the RCMP even had, in some communities, they were the operators of the gaming. And their feedback was, we know where the kids are. It's, which is quite positive. I'm certainly think with the feedback we've had from students particularly, that it's a direction we potentially should move towards. In a couple of the studies I read, there was documentation that it gets individuals out of sitting in the dark room at home in isolation. It gets them out for social interaction, which is a little more positive than being alone. So I think there is an opportunity for it to be a positive thing in the community. So I'll just leave it at that for now.
Okay. Melissa?
Thank you, May. I think this is a really good idea because I've grown up on the coast, and I know an arcade is definitely one thing that me and plenty of people have talked about. Maybe since I was like 10, like one thing our community could really use for the youth. So I'm really happy to see this come up and come through, because I think over anything, it'd be the most beneficial. And I think it would include a lot of different demographics and friend groups and stuff.
Thank you. Anyone else on this? Or do we want to go to the options? Councillor D'Andrade?
Thank you, Mayor. I fully support the arcades, but one thing that I learned as I digged into the research, the province really, as opposed like for cannabis, that they regulate everything we don't have to worry about, we just have to observe. They don't really have the regulation. If you Google, they say it regulates, but it does not have regulation. It's up to the town to do that. They give power to the municipality to regulate. And so we don't have regulation, and I think this is important. For example, Delta has, the regulation is that each machine pays $23 or $32. Is this the regulation? So what I would like, because the arcade can be as good, I mean, the outcome of the arcade and the experience that the kids will have, it's obviously, it depends on what the space would provide. And I think we don't have any regulation. So I'm trying to understand, if we approve the zoning, what kind of regulation? For example, do we say that we would like, I've seen spaces that they have just the machines, no place for the people to interact, to sit, there's no food. And that's the part that concerns me, that we have nothing. We're going to say, okay, you can operate. They can have a very small space with few machines. That's not going to really deliver the experience that if you go to big cities, they have. So I'm just trying to understand how we go about it. Are we going to do some homework? The staff would look for examples of successful arcades and to come up with some regulation?
I would say my opinion is no. I think this is an instance where just like many businesses in town, I don't want to micromanage it. I think we give confidence to the business owners to make a viable business and a place that's going to attract people, especially young people, to enjoy. And if it's not that kind of place with the open spaces that you're talking about, Councillor, I think the business is going to fail. And we just need to, like a lot of businesses in town, restaurants, anything, we don't have the capacity here to say appoint a director of arcades to regulate and manage it. And I think we leave it to the business to work or not. And if it doesn't work, it goes out of business. If it works, it's great for everybody, especially the youth of our community. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. We've heard from our youth councillor. I think that was really good feedback. And as an aunt that had 8 kids in my house over the weekend under the age of 12, I would have begged for this weekend. So I would like to move the option and Move option 1.
Seconded by Councillor Kroll. Any just further discussion?
Yeah, I have a question. I understand that some arcades, they don't have business hours during the day when kids are in school. And I know this is product of, it's a regulatory. So I would like to hear from School District 46 that has input into that, even VCH, because this is something that can have consequences. Even the type of machines, for example, there is more cooperative play, and you can have an amount of cooperative play that you can, and really boost, so it helps kids to socialize and be proactive. It's a positive outcome. So it's not about micromanaging. I think it's about providing an experience that would provide, that we are more confident that would have a positive experience.
Okay.
So my question, so the hours of...
We're into a motion now.
No, I know, but the question is, would be like open hours anytime, have games, and maybe kids would skip school and will go there? Doesn't matter?
Not up to us, but I can say, I mean, I think the reality is today, kids are carrying these around everywhere. We all are. And I don't know they could go anywhere and play games if they're in a socialized, safe atmosphere. Whether school's in session or not, at least people will be able to find them. But, I mean, it makes sense. Maybe maybe it wouldn't be, it does, again, it probably isn't going to be a sensible time to be open for, if it's oriented to students during the day. Maybe during the day, other people will come there though for other activities. But again, we're kind of going far down the road of assuming what's going to be a workable business for somebody. And I can only imagine. I mean, knowing the history of bowling alleys and things in this community, and trying to get these youth activities to start, like they have enough restrictions as it is in terms of just the population and other challenges. I don't think we should. That's the road to go down. I think we should be flexible and let business owners come forward and figure out something that works. And the school district will figure that out too. They're very, very, especially in Gibsons, their attendance is a really big deal these days, which Melissa has told us before. If they have to adapt, they certainly will. Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White. I think, you sort of captured something that covers a lot of concerns is, if someone is opening an arcade, they've got the cost of today's rents, unless they own the building outright. The gaming machines themselves are not cheap. One of the sites that I looked at was a place in Ottawa, and, they attract people of all ages, from at various times of the day. People finish shift work and come in, grab a coffee and play a game, and there's team activities. They also do music events where they'll bring in live entertainment. So I think, there is huge potential for someone here to, to do it. But it's not going to be a cheap sort of fly-by-night business because the cost of the equipment is so they're going to bring in things that people want, not what they think, And to your point, I think people are better out in a social atmosphere than sitting alone at home. So,
Yeah, and I think, another challenge of any business on the coast too is, I imagine there's probably, I've never run an arcade, but I imagine there's probably some kind of, you don't probably don't have to buy all those machines, but there's some kind of leasing arrangement. But then they all have to get transported over here by our BC ferries, and that's a different challenge than if you were trying to open one in Langley. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so are we ready to vote on the option put forward? All those in favor? The motion carries. And now to 3.7, which is for information from our Director of Planning and Development, the Housing Accelerator Fund supported program of the infill housing design competition. And there's results here to report.
Thank you, Mayor. So this report presents the results of the infill housing design competition. There were 2 design categories, so one for a small lot, which could have 3 to 4 units, and one for a long lot, which could have 5 to 6 units. There's a table in here which shows the timeline. We did add, so council endorsed the approach in November last year. We received all the submissions in March, early March. We had the panel review late March. The winners were announced on April 28th, and then we put it out for public feedback. So thank you, Youth Councillor, for the feedback on that to get more input. So then we did the People's Choice Award, and all the winners are now announced. So we had 24 submissions from 18 individuals and design firms. And 8 of the submissions were local to the Sunshine Coast, which was really great because we wanted to have that local perspective. The design elements included an analysis on the affordability and cost effectiveness, how flexible and creative and adaptable the designs could be, how the inclusivity and livability, so how the units were socially connected and inclusive, and then good neighbor design was the 4th, which was how well the units integrated into the neighborhoods. So there were 6 winners and 1 People's Choice Award. So the first place for the small lot was Driftwood by Calendar Architecture. The first place for the long lot was called Parkway by Diego Ortiz Architecture. The second place was for the small lot was Small Lot Nesting by First Light Design, who's a local architect. And then the second place for the long lot was a large lot multiplex by JWT Design, also a local architect. Third place for the small lot was Small Lot Multiplex by JWT Design, local. And then the long lot third place for long lot was Driftwood Calendar Architecture. So the Driftwood design was, and the small lot, large lot multiplex were interchangeable. You could add units. And then the People's Choice Award was for the small lot nesting by First Light Design. And all the designs are available online, and we shared it on social media as well. What was really interesting and really helpful feedback when the panel met to discuss how to choose the designs and the impacts of the small-scale multi-unit housing is the additional considerations in the staff report, and I'll just highlight some of them. They said most of the winning designs are unlikely to realize affordable housing because building new construction is not cheap and land prices are so high. And so that was a big takeaway, that we're trying to support affordable housing, but building new is just not affordable. And when a lot of the performers were shared, they didn't include the land price. So it assumes that you own the land, which isn't always the case. They said the town should pre-zone areas to allow for winning designs and similar projects. So, and part of the approach we're trying to take in our OCP is to have small-scale multi-unit housing available and pre-zone some of these areas. So that'll unfold with the OCP and zoning update. Another big takeaway was building form follows parking requirements. So the more parking requirements on site will shape how a building is built. And they said if we could reduce parking, we could get some more creative designs. And then the last is to realize 6 units on a single lot, the neighborhood street fronts will likely change, which we know that. The street feel in the neighborhood design will change quite a bit. So those were interesting takeaways. In the staff report, there's an attachment, and on our website, it shows all the winning designs. And I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. Just a quick, those are really interesting insights that helpful too that the panel came up with. Now, I might be getting ahead of ourselves with the OCP, but would we have to rezone? Like, or pre-zone, I should say? Like, I feel like the direction we're going in as a province is there's no more single-family zoning, really. Like, they would allow this, a single-family zone would have to automatically allow something like this anyway, right? Am I wrong?
Yes, basically, when we hit 5,000, we have to pre-zone. So we're not quite at 5,000, but we're planning to zone as if we were at 5,000. And then there's some flexibility there in terms of how many units we're going to allow on a lot. So that's going to be a conversation we'll have as well.
And I just have one more on the affordability. I mean, that's so important. And at least we do, these are really attractive designs. And so I'm impressed with all of them. One says affordable as a highlight, affordable and cost-effective design. So I mean, when we try to go forward and trying to encourage these designs as preset ways that we can expedite garden suites, really, is that the only expedited route, the one design that people will have if they're looking for a more affordable option? Or is there a way that we could maybe add some more? Or, I mean, I like, it's good that we kind of have the higher end ones as an option, because people are going to, obviously a lot of people will, as we see from some of the garden suites that are in town, people will probably be attracted to those who can afford it. But for people looking for more affordable housing, do we have other options? We might need input from our Director of Finance on the affordability issue.
He has some thoughts as well.
Yeah.
Affordability is challenging. I think when the design is simple and it's not a complex build, that makes it a bit more affordable. And then in terms of this first one that says affordable and cost effective, the design is replicated. So when you're replicating a design, there's more and more practice. It's kind of like a modular build in a way, and that makes it more affordable than having to tweak, having custom builds every single time. We did have some proposals that were modular construction, and so they were saying it was affordable because it was modular, but that is not always playing out, because if there isn't the demand to build modular construction, it's not that affordable. And then there were some mixed modular, so off-site construction prefab, and then bringing it on-site and then doing some custom site work. Again, that mixes things and it doesn't always make it affordable. But the province has put out a design catalog, and so has the federal government as well. So there's a whole bunch of design catalogs out there, and the idea is to put out designs, let people know what the cost is, and just basically have a shopping list of what you want to build and make it available so that the thought process around it is simplified. But it's hard to say how these are going to be affordable. But maybe the Director of Finance has some ideas.
Thank you. Mr. Ware, a little research lately on Sweden, driven by our new Prime Minister in part, who is interested with the federal government in pursuing modular housing construction in factories, using huge amounts of Canadian timber and so on. But it turns out there's a well-established model. So in Sweden, 45% of current residential construction is modular. It is based on timber from Swedish, Danish, Finnish, everybody in the neighborhood's forests. And in terms of affordability, that's when the industry really took off there in the 80s. A huge amount of it was driven from the affordable side. So there's tons and tons of designs already established and forms and methodologies to manufacture these things. And of course, in Scandinavia, there's lots of seaside communities, and the scenery is similar often to ours. So there is a lot that has been done elsewhere. Whether it will be possible to do it here is another matter. Though, wouldn't it be great?
It would be great. And also if we could build new ferries with modular design too. Wood, local wood. I'm getting thinking now.
And the economics, because they've managed to build it up to such a level, is very good. So they are getting a lot of savings, and they're able to use modular components, just like the auto manufacturers, in 10 different models kind of thing. So even a range of value of housing is using the same items, just put together a different way. But it's kind of IKEA-like, isn't it?
Yeah, and it'll be interesting if the 718 North Road goes ahead and we can see the mass timber construction in action. Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor White. To your point, 718 North Road, because that also includes modular components. And one of the contractors who I believe is bidding on the project has actually visited Scandinavia and is looking at potentially building modular units here. Over the time I have been sharing with staff, there's a company called Manta North, which, to the director of finance company, is a Scandinavian company that literally, if you've got a foundation or a space frame, they can drop a unit on. You can just go online, source out the kitchen, the appliances, the whole bit, and it's delivered to your site. And they've expanded into the States. They're building in Idaho at the moment, but there's some really interesting options out there. And IKEA, actually, no joke, they're actually providing housing in Europe.
Councillor Andrade.
My question is, for the calendar architecture, is easy to visualize because it's the same building, so I can choose, okay, I'm going to do only 2 in my house. But I'm trying to picture if I don't have a full lot. Let's say I just want to build half of lot. I come here, and is it a price, a standard price, but then I still have to get the engineer, whoever, the architect, or to adjust? Is that how it works?
Through the mayor, yeah, so the architect or the designer retains the ownership of their plans. So you would have to contact them, ask for their plans. They would have to fit it to your property. But you'd still need to get a building code. You'd still have to get, still have to apply for a building permit, make sure it meets fire separations and all that. So we'd still have to do a site process. So what we're trying to work on right now is figure out how the designs can be streamlined, and it might be through pre-approvals of a DP process or some kind of like quick process that way. But that'll unfold when we have more information on the OCP and the zoning.
Okay, thank you. So that is for information. Also very exciting to have, I mean, this is also a really great project supported by the Housing Accelerator Fund that we've been looking forward to seeing the results of for the term. And I think we'd even talked about the concept of it before we even got that funding. So it's really great to see it coming to fruition. And topping off such an exciting agenda. We've got so many, I just keep looking back at it and going, wow, the One Water strategy has finally come forward, and associated with that, the Aquifer Protection Regulation and Leapfrog Model, all these really important projects that we've been talking about all term, and that complete communities assessment, that's really one of the most interesting and engaging reports about the town I've ever seen too. So I plan to keep going back to that. So exciting day here, Town of Gibsons, and we'll finish up before 6 p.m. I think. Our next regular meeting is June 17th, 2025, at 3:30 PM. And I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Kroll, seconded by Councillor DeAndrade. All those in favor? The motion carries and the meeting's adjourned. Thanks.